Welcome to Public Speaking with Peter George. Do you want to be calm, confident, and credible every time you speak in public? Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests discuss public speaking tips, techniques, and tactics that help you increase your impact, influence, and income. Here's your host, Peter George.
As a speaker, two of the things you want to do are engage your audiences and set yourself apart from other speakers. And wouldn't it be great if you could accomplish both of these at the same time? Well, that's exactly what my guest, Gordon Stein, is going to help you do. Gordon is an international keynote speaker, blogger, personal finance expert, and author of Cash Flow Cookbook, $2 million of financial freedom in 60 easy recipes. He combines his trademark wit and storytelling style to speak with employee and association groups, financial advisors, and the media about a breakthrough path to financial wellness with no risk, minimal effort, minimal sacrifice, and no budgeting. Here's my conversation with Gordon Stein. Hi, Gordon. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Peter.
Gordon, I'm looking forward to our conversation, but to get started, tell us about your speaking background.
I had quite a speaking background in my corporate days. So I was at some large companies and a spokesperson at companies like Dell Computer and more recently at Apple. So that gives you some interesting insights into really delivering a great corporate message. And then more recently, I wrote a book called Cash Flow Cookbook, which my keynote talk is all about 0 to 1 million in 60 minutes. So I show people how to add $1 million of wealth to the retirement in a 60-minute talk. So very different kind of speaking, very passionate now about personal finance and helping people with their financial wellness.
Why did you become passionate? Why is it so important to you?
It was a bit of a fluke. I've always been interested in personal finance, but back around 2015, 2016, I discovered a little personal finance hack, kind of a way to get something for nothing. And then I discovered another one not long after that. And that led to a list of these ideas, ways of freeing up cash flow that anyone can do in any household. And the list grew to $13,000 of monthly savings ideas. And then I turned it into a spreadsheet and I said, hey, what would it be worth if you could invest these ideas over 10, 20, 30 years? And the numbers were unbelievable. So the list became a spreadsheet. And at the urging of my accountant, it became a book in my native Canada called Cash Flow Cookbook. And then I moved to the US, now in Cleveland, Ohio, and it became a US edition of the book. And now I speak on it full time. And when I look at where people are at with their finances, it's our number one stress. So I think I've got this content that can help people dramatically change their finances. It's a 1 in a million opportunity to actually make a difference and help people. And I love speaking about it.
You can tell that you love speaking about it, both here and when we were speaking before we started recording. Along your journey of speaking, I have to believe that you're much more effective, especially in the audience's eyes as well as your own, from what you used to be.
Absolutely. That's been a really interesting journey as a speaker. And probably one of the things that made the biggest difference from the start of my corporate speaking, I'd always say to someone in the audience, a colleague, one of my staff or one of my team members, I give them a sheet of paper. I say, hey, can you watch this? Give me 3 things you love, 3 things to fix. So setting up that feedback loop is critical. And then every time I speak, I love to go back, watch the video. What can I do better? Was there a pause I missed here? Did I not plant on the stage prior to delivery? Do I have some crutch words I'm using? And so always being hungry to improve, I think, is key.
It really is. And I don't think enough people do that. I don't know if we're afraid we're going to see something that we didn't do well and be embarrassed, as opposed to what you're looking for is something you might not have done well and improve upon it. And I'm guessing you also look for things that you did well.
I do for sure. And, what impacted people? What do they think? When I do a talk now on Cash Flow Cookbook, I do a pre-survey to understand exactly what the audience is looking for. And I'll give you some interesting examples. Some are quite surprising. because you may assume things about the audience, but that may not be where they're coming from. So I do a pre-survey and then I do a post-survey. How did I deliver? Would they want to hire me? Would they bring me back again? And those two things, getting dialed into what the people want up front, which most people don't know. They get on a stage with a set of assumptions. And then checking afterwards, did you tick the boxes? Did you deliver value? That's critical.
I think you're right. So many people say, they're just like my other audience. When I work with my clients, the first thing we work on, and I have a framework that I call AMP, and the A stands for audience. And who is that audience? Why is this event taking place? What do they want and need to know?
Well, I'll give you a fun example. One of the speaking engagements that I did, I guess about a year or two ago, here in Cleveland, there's a gentleman who had a chain of hair salons. And they were doing their big kickoff post-COVID. And he said, hey, can you come in and talk about financial wellness for my 120 hairstylists? And so, I had a set of ideas on what this would look like, probably a lot about debt management and, paying off credit cards and so on. So I did my pre-survey and I spent a lot of time with the owner of the salons. And first thing I learned is that their average income was $120,000 a year, which is different than I would have guessed. And when I said, what part of financial wellness is of interest? Is it about getting out of debt? Is it about investing? And I had a whole list of improving your credit score, taming your spending. Overwhelmingly, they wanted to hear about investing. So they were much wealthier and much savvier than I would have guessed. So as a result, I tuned my content to fit and made sure that it was what they were looking for.
We have so many things to look at as speakers. There's so many moving parts. What do you believe is the single most important thing for speakers to look at?
I think it's about getting dialed into the audience. It's cliche, in customer service, all about the customer, but really, really getting very interested in the audience, reading what are happening, from my case, what's happening with people's wealth and their financial wellness. So when I understand how widespread the issue is, how powerful it is, 85% of people are impacting in their work because of their stress about their finances. So when you start to understand that, that gets me dialed in, because I know when I'm looking out at my audience, even if they're fairly affluent, families making $300,000, $400,000 a year, still stressing about their money. In many cases, still living paycheck to paycheck. So I'm dialed in on what they want. And when I do that, it changes everything, because now I'm much more passionate in my delivery. I'm not thinking about me. I'm all about them. I want to understand what they're worried about, and I want to impart knowledge. I want to give them things that can make a huge difference in their life. When you do that, I think you're more focused and more dialed into the audience, and you're living their experience. You're looking at their faces and you're seeing those reactions.
And that's when they're thinking, man, he's talking directly to me.
That's exactly what happens. And then that's why after a talk, they'll be lined up to chat more, and they want to share their personal situation or reach out to you. Can they get your card? Because you touched them. You made a difference in their lives.
Also results in good book sales.
That's the plan. It does, yeah.
It works very well. But if you don't touch them, they have no need to buy your book or no desire to buy your book.
It's a different kind of a plane, because when I'm speaking, I'm not talking about my book. I'm talking about them.
Right.
It's not, let me tell you what's in my book. It's about, let me show you how to add $1 million of wealth to your retirement fund. That's compelling.
Yes, it is. You talk about making your talk, your presentations, a quest. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, the quest is, I want to improve people's finances. I want, the American Psychology Association tells us that our biggest stress is money. I'd like to change that. And I think I've got content that can actually change it. So in that way, it's not out doing a speaking engagement. It's a part of a quest to get wealth off our top stress list. And if you think about it, so many of us are living day to day. We're living paycheck to paycheck. We can't advance up Maslow's hierarchy. We can't get to our biggest purpose. So many of us would say, hey, if money wasn't an object, I'd do something entirely different with my life. So let's get them there. Let's get them moving, marching up that Maslow pyramid. That's the quest.
You and I both focus on the audience a lot in our preparation. What are some of the things you look for specifically? Do you have something that you want to know each and every time about that particular audience?
Well, I do the pre-survey, and in my pre-survey, I'm trying to understand a little bit about the content they're after, and I'm also trying to understand a bit more about their attitudes, and I want to know how motivated they are. So I have a fun survey, the typical one that I use. It's about 6 questions long. I share the results of the survey with my client, so it helps them understand a little bit more about their employees or their group or their clients. A lot of my clients are wealth advisors, so they want to add content to their clients, and I help the clients free up more cash flow for investing, which means they grow their portfolio. So it's this fabulous win-win. But once I understand all of that, then I'll craft my content to suit, and I'll make sure I'm ticking those key boxes. But because I also gather information about where they're at from an attitude about money. So are they feeling confident about their financial future? Are they already shopping for their Lamborghini? Or are they struggling to find out if Walmart's looking for greeters? Where do they sit on that continuum? So I want to gather all of that. And then I want to understand a little bit of what it is they actually do and what makes them unique and what's the best style to appeal to them. And I check every detail on that. What should I be wearing at the conference? I don't want to leave any boxes unchecked. It all matters. It all counts.
When you share that with your client, the information that you get back after your survey, how do they feel about it? Is it eye-opening to them?
The fact that I do it is really eye-opening to them. So whenever I'm talking to a prospect and I take them through my process, I do a pre-survey, I do a post-survey, and they say, wait, stop. What do you mean a pre-survey? It seems like they haven't heard of it. It is probably the biggest single selling point. I really recommend that people do it. First of all, because it makes a big difference. You'll deliver a better talk and you do a better job for your client. But second of all, because clients are blown away by the notion. I use a professional surveying tool and they can watch the results live in real time as they come in. So well worth it.
I want to dig into this a little bit because so many people don't do anything like this. Do you have them send it out so they don't reveal email addresses, or what are the mechanics there?
Well, I set the survey and I can do any kind of question, any kind of a graph, a chart, whatever I want. I can have as many or as few questions as I want. And then, so I'll craft the survey. I'll send it to them for approval. And once we're agreed on the survey, I just send them a hyperlink. So they'll include that in their audience invite. And so then the audience will hopefully click on it. I've had participation rates as high as 30, 35%, which is really great.
Yes, it is.
I did one conference, there was 94 questions in the pre-survey that they wanted me to answer. So about 350 people at the conference, 94 questions in advance.
Wow.
So you can have a free-form text where they can ask their questions. And that's a great way you can go back against your content and say, okay, how much of this did I answer?
And that's important too, because if you're missing the mark and not answering those questions, people are going to feel unfulfilled.
Yeah, absolutely. And I make a point of calling them out. I'll say, hey, over 14 of you want to know specifically about this kind of investing. So I'm going to make sure I cover that. If I miss it, give me a tap when I'm 3/4 of the way through or something like that, because they know then that they've been heard.
How do you think that differs to those of us as speakers who don't do any prep like this?
I find time and again, I would have missed the mark. So I speak in all kinds of different groups in both the US and in Canada. And I almost play a little game with myself. I'll sort of guess where the audience is at, and then I'll run the survey. And inevitably, they're often a different direction than I would have thought. So it makes a big difference to presuppose that, and even, it's good to get some engagement early in a talk and say, how many of you, hands up, how many of you do this or do that? And that'll give you a general idea, but you don't have the time to prepare and to react and to shift your content to suit. Good to do a little bit of that for the engagement, but to really get the content nailed, you've got to understand where they're at.
One of the things we need to do as speakers is to engage our audience, and we want to engage them as soon as possible. Do you think this helps engage them before the event even takes place?
I think it does, because it shows you're interested in them. So even if you applied none of it, you've got their attention because they know that you cared enough to ask. They gave you some content, and then you go. And I think that part's important. I think there's a couple other things that can make a real big difference from an engagement perspective, if you want to get into a bit of that.
Sure.
We chatted a little bit prior to the show today, and people's bodies. I think people are not using their bodies anywhere near enough. Heaven forbid, people are standing behind podiums. But when you get out there and engage, it makes a huge difference. I spoke at a conference in Toronto. I got out on the stage and I paused, which I think is really important to do. And I said, okay, I'm going to give you 4 options. How many of you are joyful about your finances? Where's my joyful people? And that's funny alone, just because the idea of being joyful about finances. And then I said, moderately concerned. Where are my moderately concerned people? And as I did this, I took my body from outstretched, arms above my head. I kind of came down a little bit. And then I scrunched down even further with my knees on the stage and my body in a bit of a ball. I said, where's my lightly terrified people? Lightly terrified, where are you? And I got a few more hands. And then I went into a complete ball on the stage. And I said, where are my ostriches? Head in the sand, terrified. There's bills coming in. You don't know what to do. And everybody was just laughing at this point. And I got back up, but there's no way I didn't have their attention as I went from, joyful, outstretched, all the way down to this little ostrich in a ball. So I think using your body in some different ways, and things like a lot of what I talk about is graphical, or it's numeric. So tricks like if you're going to draw a graph, you want to draw that backwards so your audience sees the curve rising up and to the right as you see it rising up and to the left. So you've got to be thinking about your audience. And, if there's 3 key points to something, I'll allocate 3 spots on the stage to represent those points. And a little bit Marceau-ish, I'll come back to those points as I move to these different camps of thinking. So I think these kinds of body things, a lot of speakers miss. The other one, which is so powerful, is telling a story. And if it's a really great story, I've got a couple that I literally can't deliver without getting a touch tearful myself. They're that powerful. And I use those quite frequently in my talks. And it's such a game changer. I like to start with one and end with one. And there's one that I use that I start with it, and then I introduce it as if it's a different story, but actually it's the finale to the first story at the end. So it forms this terrific capstone because they remember the story that I started with, and they see it picked up again at the end.
Story is one of the more powerful aspects of public speaking, in my opinion anyway, that you can provide to your audience. Just like any other story, a movie, a book, they get engrossed in the story. And more importantly, they see the moral of that story.
They absolutely do. It's interesting. I used to do a lot of running. And one of the stories I used to tell back in my corporate days, when I was talking to my sales team to get them doing their all in terms of, attainment in the quarter. And the story was I had to drop by the bank prior to going for my morning run. So I needed some papers and some documents. So I didn't have a place to put them because I was running. So I thought I'd just do a light jog to the bank, make my deposits and whatever, and then go do my run. So I had a little fanny pack on to hold my papers and my wallet and everything. So I went and did my banking, and then I did my usual run. And I was running down this boardwalk, and I had about 3 miles ahead of me on the stretch of the boardwalk, and I was picking up my pace. And then I was listening, and I heard there was somebody right behind me, and I thought there's just no way I'm going to let this person pass me. So I picked up my pace a little bit, but I could hear them. They were right on my tail, and I kept picking up my pace, and I could hear them. They were almost stride for stride with me. It felt like they were just behind me and maybe a little bit to my right. So I'm running, and I thought, the boardwalk was going to end in another half a mile. And I thought at the end, I'd turn around, have a big laugh, and high five this guy, but no way was he going to pass me. I gave it my all, and I get to the end of the boardwalk. I'm just absolutely gasping. And I turn around to congratulate this guy. There's nobody there.
Really?
It was this fanny pack on my back that I don't normally wear. And it was jiggling. And it sounded to me like there was a runner right behind me. And I turned in the performance of a lifetime because I didn't want someone to get past me. And it took me to a whole nother layer of potential. So really fun story, unexpected ending, but a great way to say, when you think you're giving it your all, as the SEALs would tell us, you're only at 40%.
Hey, let's circle back to body language for a second.
Yeah.
When you were talking about your audience will see the graph going up left to right, and you have to draw it the opposite way. It's funny because I teach my clients when you're speaking, the past is on your right
Yes.
and the future is on your left, which is opposite of how we would normally express it.
Right.
And over the years, I've had other speaking coaches or very prominent speakers go, Peter, you're looking way too deep into this.
No, I think we're all underthinking it, if anything. You want to get to the point where the audience is so in sync with you. They're a part of you. They feel like they're running on the boardwalk, if that's your story. They're understanding the financial concepts that you're trying to impart, or the leadership concepts that you're trying to get across and share with them. I think all of those things are key. It makes a big, big difference, because if you're doing, the past to the future transition, you're doing it backwards, it feels discordant to them because it's not the way. We all think left to right as time, every graph ever drawn, time always progresses left to right. And they need to see it left to right, of course, from their perspective. And I think the other thing that can be really powerful is you can anchor time with different spots on the stage. Maybe you're talking about your leadership practices when you first started out, and then as a middle manager, what you learned, and then, as a more senior manager, how you dealt with things. Or you can anchor heights at different points. It's almost like I did some theater arts training back in high school. And when you think about mimes, they talk about the point fixe, which is a point in space. And as they move, they hold that point fixed. And you can do that with different heights of things, depending on what it is you're talking about, or different concepts. You can create spaces on the stage, whether it's right on the stage or it might be a point up in the air, and you're coming back to it. Now, a really powerful way to look at this is to watch a video of yourself speaking and speed it up and watch it at, 4 or 5 times. And what you'll see is a lot of speakers, they just keep going back and forth across the stage, but it carries no meaning and it's distracting because they're taking away from their message. But what happens if each of those positions means something? They stop and they plant and they deliver. And then they stop and they plant, deliver somewhere else. Or what if their hands, instead of their hands just going up and down like this, their hands are signifying something? Or part of the time you're walking with one hand in a pocket and you're gesturing with the remaining hand. And then when you're trying to emphasize a different set of points, you switch hands. So your body can do so much more for them. And your body can convey, a setback that you went through, and your body can convey elation. So they can start to participate in your emotions more than just your content. So I think it can't be understated.
This becomes more of a performance than just getting up and providing content.
It really does, And if you watch great artists of any kind, I love the notion of performance. Their timing and their gestures and their knowledge of the audience makes such a difference. Just as a fun example, I'm a big Springsteen fan. And I'm from Toronto, Canada originally. And in 1992 and 1993, the Toronto Blue Jays won back-to-back World Series. And right after the second one that they won, Springsteen was playing in the park where the Jays play. And they had just won the second back-to-back World Series. Toronto was just lit up about Blue Jays. It just changed the whole city's identity. He gets up on stage, and he could have played Glory Days, which is his baseball-themed song, which would have been great. People would have liked it. He pauses, he pulls a Jays cap out of his back pocket, and he puts it on his head, and people went crazy. And then when they died down a little bit, he said, I hear they play a little baseball in here. And people just went, like, the understatement was brilliant. People just went electric, leaves the hat on, hits into Glory Days, and the crowd, a showman like that really gets it. And if you watch some of these great performers, whether it's Clapton or Springsteen, what they're doing, everything matters. Their gestures, their timing. And studying some of these people, whether they're comedians or rock musicians, there's lessons everywhere to be had.
Gordon, we've shared a lot of information here, great ideas. I really appreciate them, and I'm sure my listeners do too. How can my listeners get in touch with you?
Sure, they can have a peek at my website, which is cashflowcookbook.com. And while you're on there, you can figure out how to reach out with me. I'd love to chat with other speakers and help if I can. And my content is all about helping people with their financial wellness. So if they're interested in that, as an aside, they can get a copy of Cashflow Cookbook on Amazon. There's a Canadian and a U.S. edition, both in paperback and in Kindle.
Great. Thanks again. It's been a pleasure.
A real pleasure. Thank you so much, Peter.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Until next time, remember, when it comes to speaking in public, you've got this.